Good morning. My name is Ian Charlotta, Hearing Officer for San Francisco Public Works. We have two representatives from Public Works for this meeting. We have Cerise Waiters and Chris Buck, who will be clerking this. As noted, this hearing is being recorded via Zoom and will be available afterwards through a link on the San Francisco Public Works website, sfpublicworks.org. And Cerise just put the email address in the chat, so you can also reach out directly. As this is a virtual hearing, there is no sign-in sheet, so if you would like to receive information about the results of this hearing, please send an email to the email address Cerise just put in. This public hearing is being held to consider 3 appeals from property owners that were assessed fines for excessive or illegal pruning of trees, for not planting a replacement tree, or for illegally removing a tree. They are Hearing Order 208312, to consider an appeal from the property owner for the fine issued for the illegal pruning of 4 street trees adjacent to 1350 Ulloa Street. Fine levied for the illegal pruning is $9,208. The second order is Hearing Order 208313, to consider an appeal from the property owner for the fine issued for illegal pruning of 12 street trees adjacent to 2200 Keith Street. The fine levied for this illegal pruning is $27,624. And then we have Hearing Order 208314, to consider an appeal from the property owner for the fine issued for the illegal removal of 1 street tree adjacent to 172 Dorado Terrace. The fine levied for the illegal removal is $10,000. My job as a hearing officer is to gather the facts for the hearing item, listen to your testimonies, and help our Director of Public Works make determinations. I will not be making any decisions today. Instead, I will forward the findings from this hearing and make my recommendations to the Director. The Director will make the final determinations. When the Director's determinations are made, the department will notify you of them. Therefore, if you want to be notified, actually, since we don't have a sign-in sheet, please email the address attached. The hearing will proceed as follows. I will ask Public Works staff to speak first and present the case. Then I will allow the property owner or appellant to speak. Then any member of the public or witness who wishes to speak. Then the department, if the department would like to address any comments. And then the property owner or appellant again, if that person has any rebuttals. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. The clerk will monitor the time for all speakers. If we were in the physical room, there'd be a bell. In this case, there will probably just be a notification. Comments and questions should be addressed to me and not the department or the applicant. If you cannot finish your comments within the allotted time, you may submit written testimony to me by the end of this hearing. If I feel that a question is warranted, I will ask that question. After all comments are completed, I will close the item. We will now begin the hearing. I'd like to begin first with the case 208312 for 1350 Ulloa Street.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Buck, the urban forester with San Francisco Public Works, Bureau of Urban Forestry. And what I will do this morning is, typically at the start of an administrative hearing, we like to go over the urban forestry ordinance and the pertinent codes that are impacted and part of the discussion for the hearing. The good news is we won't repeat this at each of the 3 cases. We'll do it once to start the hearing and then dive into the details of the 3 cases. So just a little bit of background. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And to do that, let me pull up the PowerPoint from the beginning. And hold on a second. So Cerise, can you confirm if the screen shows the front page full screen?
Yes, it does.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, thank you again, everyone, for waiting. So this is an administrative hearing, July 18th, 2023. And San Francisco does have an ordinance, a tree ordinance, and it establishes, let me move, there's a little bar here I want to move. Okay, It establishes authorization and standards for addressing a wide range of issues regarding trees in the public right-of-way or for significant trees on private property that are within 10 feet of the public right-of-way. This is codified under Article 16 of the Public Works Code. Let me do screen down. Page down? No. Okay, I guess I click. So section 808 within Article 16 of the Public Works Code spells out the protection of trees and landscape material. It has a section on the injury or destruction of trees and that it's prohibited with a definition. And it states that it shall be unlawful for any person to intentionally, maliciously, or through gross negligence injure or destroy a street tree, any tree on city property, or a significant tree and a landmark tree. In addition to the penalties set forth in these subsections, the director may require any person who removes or destroys a tree in violation of the provisions of this Article 16 to pay for each tree removed or destroyed a sum of $10,000 or the tree's replacement value, whichever is the greater of those two amounts. The director may require any person who injures a tree in violation of the provisions of this Article 16 to pay a sum of money equal to the diminishment of the tree's value as set forth in the current edition of the Guide for Plant Appraisal, which is published and reviewed by the Council of Tree and Landscape Appraisers. Where an abutting property owner has removed a street tree or trees without obtaining a permit, the department shall require the property owner plant a replacement tree or trees with total diameter measured at 6 inches above ground that is equal to or greater than the total diameter of the street tree or trees that were removed without a permit. So that's in addition to any fine that may remain following the resulting decision. Regarding 806, permitted planting and removal of street trees, highlighted in red, if the department grants a tree removal permit, it shall require that a street tree or trees of equivalent replacement value to the one removed be planted in the place of the removed tree or impose an in lieu fee. Today, we won't have cases that relate to the protection of trees during construction, but we have a section on our website that talks about construction work and that tree protection measures need to be implemented prior to the start of construction so that trees are protected during those activities. Within Article 16, we have a section on definitions, section 802, where in G, injure or injury is defined, and it really defines specifically all the ways in which a tree may be injured or potentially injured. And I just want to highlight the final line here, that pruning, even pruning itself, can be considered an injury, which in and of itself will kill or cause a tree to decline, meaning the health of the tree is impacted, or severing of all or part of a tree. So just to clarify, it doesn't say that the fine is only issued if the tree dies or that the tree will die. There's a lot of other negative impacts caused by chopping or excessive pruning, including severing of all or even part of a tree. So we have the penalties are spelled out in Article 16, sections 811, C1 and C3. We've kind of hit on this already, $10,000 for tree removed or destroyed, whichever is the greater of the two, and that the director may require any person who injures a tree in violation of the provisions to pay a sum of money equal to the diminishment of the tree's value. We don't have any examples of this, but Part 3, when one or more additional violations of the provisions of this article occur within 1 year of the first violation, the director may assess a responsible party $20,000 for each removed or destroyed tree and double the diminishment or the injured tree's value. Getting back to sort of plain language here. In summary, trees are more than just beautiful additions to urban life. They're an essential component of the city's ecosystem and provide enormous environmental and social benefits. A permit is required to remove any street tree, significant tree, or landmark tree. It is illegal to injure a tree. Injuries can include excessive pruning and malicious acts like nailing objects to trees, and negligent acts like vehicular accidents. An illegal removal of a tree requires replacement with equivalent inches in total diameter of the street tree or trees that were removed. And it's the property owner's responsibility to know the law, as well as tree contractors. And ignorance of that law is not, typically a viable reason for how the situation occurred. So there are best management practices, and these are international standards, not something that's just specific to San Francisco. So a couple of the key points here is that you don't want to remove more than 25% of the tree canopy each year. So do not remove more than 25% of the foliage on a branch or a limb each year. This will stress the tree and may produce weakly attached branches the following year. Do not cut back to a branch that is less than 1/3 or 1/2 the size of the main branch. What this does is it creates a stub. So it's important to selectively remove branches throughout the tree, not just the lowest branches you can reach. Removing the lowest branches when it is unnecessary is sometimes called limbing up. This can cause a tall, spindly tree to form and can also reduce trunk flare and girth of the tree. Lower branches help keep the vigor in the lower portion of the tree, and this is especially important in conifers and evergreen trees. So key points is that excessive pruning can lead to decline or kill a tree, and severing all or parts of the tree and topping. So this is a visual of how not to prune trees. This is just an image from some outreach materials that were produced by Friends of the Urban Forest years ago. But topping street trees is illegal, and as we'll continue to explore, we'll explain the reasons why. So what is quote unquote topping? So topping is creating weakly attached rapid new growth that the tree tries to recover energy producing leaves as quickly as possible. So this image is often confusing to the public, where the public may see this as the sign of a healthy, robust tree or response. It's actually a stress response. Trees need leaves to photosynthesize, and the tree here is borrowing on stored energy within the tissues of the tree to produce new leaves so that it can actually continue to function. So this image is not a success story, but demonstrates that initial response to topping. So topping creates weakly attached, rapid new growth. All the tree's resources were used up trying to recover a leaf canopy. In this particular case, this tree died. Over time, as those new sprouts, if the tree survives and keeps growing, it creates rapid new growth. And when they grow large, all these newly grown branches are prone to limb failure and breaking off. In addition to those regrown branches, improper pruning is also an entry point for pathogens and decay. So on the image on the left, these topping cuts were made probably 10 or more years before this image was taken. And you can see the amount of decay that has progressed and developed below those old topping cuts. Those new branches that are formed are weakly attached, are basically just sitting on top of a bunch of decay and have a very superficial connection to the original stem, referred to as epicormic attachments. So topping is not the same as pollarding. Pollarding occurs in front of a few trees in front of City Hall, along trees on California Street, and then in the parks at the bandshell area between the museums in Golden Gate Park, there are examples of pollarded trees. It can be confusing to the public. Pollarding is begun when the tree is very, very young, and you make a single topping cut and never create topping cuts again. You just prune the sprouts that are produced each year. And over time, that creates this sort of fist-like callus knob. So there's definitely a difference, but that's a question that comes up quite a bit. And then regarding overhead lines, PG&E is required by law to inspect all the overhead power lines once a year. And so they will prune trees that they believe pose a risk to the high voltage lines and occasionally secondary low voltage lines. Phone and cable are on the lowest section of the overhead lines. And really those phone and cable lines are designed to just be kind of there. They can have a lot of contact with the canopy. You don't need to prune canopy away from the lower set of lines. One point to make today is that we now have Street Tree SF, or Prop E, which passed in November 2016 and became effective on July 1st, 2017, where the city now maintains all of the street trees throughout San Francisco. So historically, we only maintained 1/3 of the street trees along the major thoroughfares in the city, and 2/3 of property owners had the responsibility for maintaining street trees. What these images are showing is that Prop E, when it passed, which we're now referring to as Street Tree SF, makes the city responsible for pruning trees and repairing the sidewalk when tree roots may damage the sidewalk. So we have a systematic and strategic approach to maintenance. There's a $19 million set aside in the city's general fund that funds this maintenance. And we have completed census in 2016. So we have all of our street trees cataloged and databased. And this is just showing some of our organizational tools on how we go about pruning trees in the city, where we prune a number of blocks within what we refer to as a grid or key map approach. This shows some examples. The city has the equipment, and so through economy of scale and bringing all of our equipment to a single block at a time, we can prune trees in an effective manner. And we've pruned thousands and thousands of trees since this began in 2017. We've been leaving door hangers in advance of our work so that the public isn't surprised, because again, many in the public are still used to being responsible for that maintenance. So thank you for kind of bearing with me, but want to just explain big picture some of the rules and regulations in our urban forestry ordinance. So now I'm going to segue into the first case, order number 208-312, 1350 Loa Street. This was an appeal from the property owner for the fine issued for the illegal pruning of 4 street trees adjacent to 1350 Loa Street. The fine levied for the illegal pruning is $9,208, and the fine amount is essentially $2,302 per tree. So the street trees adjacent to this property, this is an example of street trees that were historically the maintenance responsibility of the property owner up until July 1st, 2017. This means that the current owner or previous owners were needing to maintain those street trees. That said, we've always had an ordinance that still protects street trees. So even prior to July 1st, 2017, even if the city, Public Works, didn't quote unquote maintain the tree, the pruning guidelines always still needed to be followed. And that's been true for decades and decades. So I just wanted to clarify that prior to 2017, it doesn't mean that trees could be pruned haphazardly or without care. Those requirements still existed. And so what happened at this site, we have the subject trees are 4 acacia trees. Their common name is Blackwood acacia. The Latin or scientific name is Acacia melanoxylon. They're a fast-growing broadleaf evergreen species. And typically these trees, if left alone and allowed to grow to their genetic potential, these trees would be quite tall at this point. The wind out there would certainly keep them lower than typical, but these trees could easily be, 40 feet tall at this point in time. What we found when we made the inspection in November of 2022 during a routine inspection, we received complaints through service requests or phone calls or email. We also are reviewing permits and other tree conditions throughout the city. So we also may just come across excessive pruning and pull over. So we're, sort of not deputized, but we have the ability to see trees, and as we come across them, we document their condition. Clearly here we see fresh topping cuts. At the time they were pruned, nearly the entire foliage of all the 4 trees were removed. There's really just a few little sprouts left behind. So very damaging to the trees. If you look at Google Street View, and I'm not showing all the photos, but it does look that each year or two over the last 15 or so years from photos available on Google Street View, the owner was clearly pruning the trees every year or two and keeping them kind of small or rounded over or lollipopped. Now, not every year were they topped, because once they were topped, the new growth was being pruned and just sort of kept small. These canopies were kept kind of unnaturally small, again, as sort of like topiary or a little bit like lollipops. It looks like in 2019, the corner tree shows some of the old topping cuts. But again, the property owner was responsible for pruning the trees. And it does look like they were pruning the trees every couple of years for probably 10 years, going back to 2008 when photos are available on Google Street View. Here's an overall view of Ulloa. We try not to be defensive. We issue the fine, and then I do want to thank the property owner for responding right away. They've been thoughtful and putting in time and effort to handling the fine. Some of the feedback we've received, just to address some of it, because again, it's the goal here isn't to get too defensive on the part of the staff, but just present the information we have. There was some concern from the property owner that they didn't know exactly who performed the work. So I think that's the focus of our conversation today, is who performed the work. But certainly the city didn't prune the trees the way that we found them, and we don't believe a contractor would have pruned them that way. There's power lines across the street, but even then they wouldn't have been pruned in such an extreme fashion. In this January 2023 Google Street View, it shows that the work was done already. The trees are certainly disfigured, badly topped. They have poor structure, and that poor structure is now the responsibility of the city to look after. We're going to have to guide and train the new growth so that we don't have branch failures in the future. Overall, that's typically what we provide, is just some before and after photos, just showing that, yes, more than 25% of the canopies were removed. In fact, nearly all of the canopy was removed. And I'd be really curious to hear from the property owner about who it was that performed the work. There are resources for property owners if you hire a licensed, contracted, qualified professional. The State Licensing Board of California has consumer protections in place where you could file a complaint against that contractor. So just like if you had a roof installed by a roofing company and they did it in a way that building inspection said didn't meet code, the issue is really between the property owner and the roofing company that performed the work. So in that case, while you might complain to the city for being cited, you ultimately are left as the consumer to have to pursue the matter with the person who performed the work and didn't perform it up to code. So that's overall, other than this educational presentation, our recommendation is really to direct the property owner to pursue the matter with whomever performed the work. To be consistent with how we've handled similar cases, we confirmed that the trees were excessively pruned, and we issued the fine. That concludes the staff presentation. And again, thank you for your patience in going through that preliminary review of our ordinance. Thank you.
So I believe, Mr. Buck, you can go ahead and begin with the first item. You're muted and you'll need to start over. You're muted.
Thank you, Cerise. The 1350 ULOA was included in that. So that was the first item. So I segued from the overall preliminary presentation into the first case, 1350 ULOA. So
I'm
that,
sorry. I
no
was
worries.
switching
That, yeah.
computers at the time and I
Yep.
missed it. Sorry.
Yeah. So that, yeah, that concludes the staff presentation for 1350 ULOA.
Okay. Do we have the property owner or other public comments for 1350 Ulloa?
Yes, we have the
Hello?
first person. You should be able to speak. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Charlie Alcary. I'm the son of Roger Alcary, who is the homeowner. I seen your presentation and I understand what you're saying. In 2016, my brother and I opened a new business at Delhi, and we've been running this business pretty much on our own with low staff. And during the pandemic, we pretty much lost our staff and been having a hard time getting new staff. So we haven't had much extra time. We've been working about 16 hours a day. When in the past, I think before 2016, we were not educated on tree pruning. So we have had people prune the trees, but when we seen the trees pruned to that level in 2022, that was a shocker. It wasn't us who did it. And when we got the notice, we seen that the way that the notice was written, it looked like you guys stated that you guys pruned the trees in 2019 or so. So that was kind of weird to see that. We did not receive a door knocker, so I didn't have information about that. And we went around the neighborhood, like asking if anybody seen who cut the trees. And I drove around a lot of times looking to see who's cutting trees, to see if they're doing the same, because it was really a shocker that those trees were cut to that level. So I did see a AT&T truck on in a bucket, and I took some photos and videos of that. It wasn't exactly similar, but it was something. So I also noticed that the city has put protection around the other trees during the construction, because there's been lots of construction going on, and our trees never got any protection or barriers to protect them. And there's one day that I was leaving to work in the morning, and I seen the construction guy, they gave us a letter saying that they wanted to remove one bush to put up a new electrical pole. And then there was a tree that was next to it. When they took down the bush, they also took down that tree. And that wasn't part of anything they informed us about. So
30 seconds.
yeah, so I had basically, after that day when we came back, it was that same night when we seen the trees were cut. So that's when I thought that they're the ones who did it. Maybe the electrical was in their way, or they're doing something with electrical. So that's where our position is. And I see in the past, yes, they would have maybe have cut wrong, but at that time we didn't do it.
All right, there's our beeper. Thank you. Does Public Works have a response to their comments?
Thank you, Chris Buck with Public Works, Bureau of Urban Forestry. Again, I appreciate that the property owner responded right away when the fine was issued. You know, I think they reached out to our inspector who had issued the fine, Susan Awberry, and we have additional material that we'll obviously forward to you as a hearing officer, so you can see that material provided by the property owner. So I just want to confirm we did receive that information, and certainly forwarding it to you as part of the overall review of the matter. No, I think my only follow-up question would be kind of clarifying if there potentially is like a tenant in the building. And, you know, even if I were to ask a question like, hey, did you call the city? If they didn't know that excessive pruning that occurred November or so was excessive or exceeded the rules, they wouldn't know necessarily to call the city. So I don't feel like their lack of calling us to say what happened to these trees is not that relevant in this case. More just overall, if there was a tenant in the building, because there are times when tenants also take matters in their own hands. So yeah, just curious about the tenant, and just reiterating that we've investigated as much as possible and don't see any clear evidence that a contractor or any other city agency would have pruned the 4 trees at the property. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. All right. Well, I guess, does the brother of the property owner have any rebuttal to this?
Hello? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, can you raise your hand if you can hear me? Okay, so thank you for that. No, we don't have a tenant it's a single family home. The people that live there is my brother and I, my father and my mom. At the time, my mom was having surgery on her foot. She had bad foot and a bad knee. And unfortunately, I was also in a boot, so I was a little struggling at that time. I tripped and fractured my toe. But we don't have a tenant there, and because the city was constantly doing work and PG&E and power lines and everything, we were thinking that maybe they did it because maybe the trees were going up into their power lines, or they're replacing poles all up and down the street. Also, something that's not part of this, a few years back, there was a water main that busted, and a lot of the soil came out from underneath the trees. And there's a tree that's closer to 14th Avenue. They were doing some construction work, and I feel like they injured the tree at that time because they dug a big hole down to do some repairs. And after that time, that tree was growing very, very slowly. So I just want to let you guys know about that. So I don't know if all the people who do the construction in the street are aware of how to make sure that tree roots don't get damaged also.
Okay. Well, thank you for your comments. As noted, I'm not making any decisions right now, but I will be submitting a recommendation to the director within 10 business days. If there are no further questions for order 208-3112, then we will move on to the next item, which is 208-313, regarding a fine for 12 trees adjacent to 2200 Keith Street.
And just to clarify, I do believe we need to hear public comment for that previous case, 1350 Uloa first.
No, my apologies. Are there any public comments?
Cerise, does it look anyone raise their hand?
No, there are no hands raised.
Okay. Perfect. I will go on to that next item that the hearing officer already called forward. So I will go back to sharing my screen. This is Chris Buck again, urban forester with Public Works Bureau of Urban Forestry. So let me go to screen share. And just want to make sure, Cerise, we have a full screen PowerPoint up in front of us.
Yes, we do.
Perfect. Thank you. I just always want to double check that. So yes, the next item, order number 208313. This is regarding 2200 Keith Street, and it's to consider an appeal from the property owner for the fine issued for the illegal pruning of 12 street trees adjacent to 2200 Keith Street. The fine levied for the illegal pruning is $27,624. And just to spell it out, that's the basic in lieu fee of $2,302 per tree. This image shows a couple of the frontages of the Yosemite Plaza where the site is located in the Bayview. And the subject trees, the species, there's two. Primarily, the main species is, the common name is fern leaf, fern pine, but the genus scientific name is Afrocarpus gracilior. It used to be referred to as Podocarpus gracilior, but the genus changed in the last 10 years or so. So again, the before photos show the trees planted in the sidewalk and the public right-of-way around the property on different frontages. The photos are of the trees as our urban forestry inspector came across them on April 6th, 2023. Again, sometimes people are curious about how we received a complaint, whether that was from the public or routine inspection. That's typically what occurs. We have a lot of trees in the Bayview and we do a lot of inspection work. We have 6 inspectors for the entire city, and each inspector has a couple of supervisorial districts to monitor and maintain and manage. So we're in the Bayview on a regular basis. So again, the complaint was either received to Public Works from a service request from the public or during a routine drive through the area. What this shows though is that nearly all the foliage is removed. There's some foliage left on each tree, but really more or less most of the foliage is removed, certainly well beyond 25% of the living canopy. So we refer to these as topped or excessively pruned trees. And when trees are pruned this way, we've talked about the long-term impacts of the tree. Our concern is not aesthetic, that we're trying to kind of pigeonhole into having plants look a certain way. Certainly grass and bushes you can really hedge back and do a number of things with, but trees are different. Trees are a long-term asset. And what we're trying to do is establish structure that's going to remain strong and intact for decades. And so this image just shows a lot of the heading and topping cuts. Really what we're trying to achieve with this species is a somewhat central leader with secondary smaller branches. And so again, this just shows the excessive pruning that occurred with each of the trees. And, we can get into perhaps what the motivations were for the pruning. Sometimes people are unaware of the pruning guidelines, or they may hire someone who's not qualified to be touching the tree. But again, the maintenance responsibility for trees in the public right of way is assigned to Public Works. This image shows one of the trees, again, before image on the left. It's an evergreen tree, so it should have that amount of foliage, a little less. On the left, it had pretty good clearance for pedestrians over the sidewalk, and the trees are also set back from the street and road. So they had great clearance for pedestrians and automobiles over the road. What's going to actually happen is that these trees in a stress response are going to hopefully sprout back. But as they do that, they're going to be bushier and thicker and more of a maintenance challenge than they were prior to the pruning. So what's ironic or unfortunate is that the goals were probably to increase visibility away from the building and over the sidewalk, but this is actually going to set them back, because as we'll show in the before photos, the trees were just starting to develop canopies that are growing upwards. So the idea is to establish the canopy up above the sidewalk, up above the roadway, and then you prune them back from the facade of the building. But we have a super wide sidewalk here for San Francisco, and they're set back from the curb. So a really good setting to establish street trees. But the way they were pruned, it almost looks like the intention here is to somehow create like a topiary tree. And that's just not what we want to see established here. We would like to see large trees established. The power lines are, as you can see in this image, are across the street. So there's literally no need to be reducing the height of the trees. And I see there's additional lighting to the site. So I do want to acknowledge and appreciate that the PUC lighting, typical street lighting for a street, certainly is never adequate to light a house. I live in the Bayview near 3rd and Paloux, and I've got a light over my front door, and we have lights over the driveway. So I do note the additional lighting installed by the property owner. That's appreciated. That's a real public asset that makes it safer for those walking by. Again, just looking at the after photo, certainly when you look at the before photo, there's very, very little foliage left on this tree. And just looking through each of the trees. So we do evaluate the trees individually. This is a magnolia, and a magnolia to be pruned this way is clearly pruned by someone who's not a professional, not trained, likely not licensed with the state or through the International Society of Arboriculture. That may make it very difficult for the property owner to essentially take the fine and hand it to their contractor. That's what we recommend. The issue is really between, it's a consumer protection issue, a homeowner, property owner hiring someone who does a very poor job, just like that example I provided earlier about if someone replaced your roof and building inspection said, you can't build a thatched hut roof on your rooftop, you go to your contractor, the person who performed the work, and say, we hired you to do a job professionally and to follow the rules in the city. That wasn't done, and now we need you to make us whole. So that's our recommendation in these cases. Again, just showing pruning that middle tree in particular, but even the tree on the left and the right has been topped. In the before photos on the upper left, I'd consider those still relatively small trees, just trying to get established. And they have good clearance over the road and over the sidewalk. But to be consistent with how we handle similar cases, we do issue the fine for excessive pruning of $2,302. And so multiplied by 12 trees, that's how we got to the fine amount, which is a very steep amount. We recognize that, $27,624. We do also have a street tree class that sometimes is part of the a resulting decision is in an attempt to try to reduce some of the fine. Offering that tree care class to the property owner as a way to slightly reduce some of that fine amount. Those are the things that the director and hearing officer will be reviewing following the case. But that concludes the staff presentation. Just treating this property the way we approach other trees and sites that we've issued fines for, and we've been doing this for decades and decades. So respectfully conclude the staff presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Does the property attorney present have any comments?
Cerise, it looks like one caller had raised their hand. I don't know if you saw that. Oh yeah, there we go.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes,
can hear
good
you.
morning. We can hear you.
Oh, okay, yeah. My name is David Lai. I'm the building owner of the Yosemite Plaza. We purchased the building in the 2009, and we were improving the building, get all the permit. Would require to plant the tree. In that time, there was never a booklet or something telling us how to prune the tree or regulation. So, and I want to improve the entire area. So I made the Yosemite Street and the Waller Street is much nicer in the whole Bayview district. I think that's why city of the San Francisco MTA leased a building from us. And then the reason we pruning the tree, we have a few sidewalk, people walk by the building, have the branches kind of cut into their eye. So I just called my house gardener, and I say, hey, why don't you go down to trim down the tree, and I really don't know. They cut so much, causing the problem. But I would look it up the last couple of weeks, and I took some pictures, and it discovered the canopy grow back. So almost like the front of the city building. So I know we made a mistake by the new ordinance, and I don't know how. And also we're facing a problem with the homeless people on the Water Street side. They keep on breaking the tree or hang the tin on our building on the tree. So we're about 3-4 trees would die. We've been replacing 2-3 times already. I hope the Bureau can consider reducing the fine, or I can do something to help the area. Also, we're going to plant more tree along the Jennings Street and the end of the Water Street too. So that will improve the entire area. From now on, I'll be very carefully and hire arborists and give out the consultation and checking the tree for us. And
30
also
seconds.
I have my employee will go to the watering the tree, regularly every week, make the tree growing healthy. So I hope the Bureau can stop by, take a look at how to the canopy of the tree grow back or not. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Does Public Works have any response to these comments?
Thank you, Chris Buck with Bureau of Urban Forestry. I appreciate the feedback from the property owner. And exactly, just to clarify, any future maintenance would be performed by Public Works. But if if branches were observed to be getting low again, we would recommend that the public calls 311, or calls Public Works directly. There are limited times when we do allow a property owner to perform some tree work. And just to throw an example for educational purposes, if someone needed to install scaffolding to paint their building, we can't prune the tree on that exact turnaround time. And so when we meet with a property owner, we do on a case-by-case basis provide permission for a property owner to hire a contractor to do maintenance when it's not part of our current schedule. So those are the scenarios kind of moving forward, but I made note of the comments by the property owner and just wanted to point that out, but I appreciate the feedback. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does the property owner have any additional comments? Okay, if the property owner does not have any additional comments, are there any public comments?
There are no raised hands at this time.
Okay, well, thank you for the presentations and commentary. I believe this item is concluded. Let us move on to the third item, which is hearing order 208-314 for illegal removal of a street tree at 172 Dorado Terrace. Please go ahead.
Thank you. This is Chris Buck again with the Bureau of Urban Forestry. And it looks like I've got screen sharing is paused. Let me resume share. That's great. Let me bring this to our third and final item for this morning. Slideshow from current slide. Pardon me. And just to confirm, Cerise, do you see the title page for Dorado
Yes.
Terrace?
Yes,
Perfect.
it's showing.
Yeah, thank you very much. So to reiterate, this is order 208-314 172 Dorado Terrace to consider an appeal from the property owner for the fine issued for the illegal removal of one street tree adjacent to 172 Dorado Terrace. The fine levied for the illegal removal is $10,000. The subject tree pictured here was planted a couple of years ago, and this image is March 2022 that we pulled up from Google Street View. And it's actually in this image is recovering from a heading cut, meaning a topping cut that was made in 2021. This image taken on February 22nd of this year shows the image that the way we found the tree in February. A little bit of the site history is that in 2021, we were notified by the public that this tree had been cut in half. And so It may be difficult for the layperson to see it, but in the center of this image, you can see kind of a fresh cut to the trunk where the height of this tree was probably reduced by at least a third, if not closer to half the tree. So when that was brought to our attention, we did mail very often when we've issued fines. Can't tell you how many people will ask, my goodness, was there any chance you could have issued me a warning in the past? Sometimes we can. In this particular case, we did choose to issue a warning. And so we had sent a letter in May of 2021 stating that San Francisco Public Works is responsible for the street trees, but that we confirmed that this tree had been improperly pruned. We did caution that improper pruning of trees is illegal and may lead to a fine. Topping and heading cuts are not proper pruning techniques, impacting the health of the tree. This letter serves as a warning and notice to offer some information regarding proper care. So we really very clearly stated, do not touch this tree, or you'll be fined punitively and billed for the labor costs associated with planting and procuring a new tree. The minimum fine is $2,193. Now our code since that time has actually been beefed up. And so we'll talk a little bit more about the punitive part of the fine in a moment. So looking back at this image, I think one could certainly say this is excessive pruning. I really just want to be clear. I don't think this is pruning. I think this was pretty much a removal. No branches were left to remain on the tree. We can't possibly establish a tree when all the branches are removed. And so the warning letter, at that time, it was a pruning warning letter because there were a lot more branches left on when that heading cut had been made. But in this particular case, I don't think anyone could fairly argue that this is pruning. So it's excessive pruning, yes, but it's also really an illegal removal. And what we wanted to kind of spell out is the administrative penalty section that basically when someone removes or destroys a tree in violation of provision, for each tree removed or destroyed, a sum of $10,000, the tree's replacement value, whichever is greater. So our code has been beefed up so that for an illegal removal, that minimum fine is now $10,000, not $2,302 for excessive pruning. Also, our code was amended in February 2022 to require that in addition to the fine, there's a replacement requirement where 6 inches above grade, above ground, the tree needs to be measured. And based on the photos, it's measured to be 4 inches at 6 inches above grade. And so we need 4 inches of caliper or the equivalent in the replacement value separate from the fine. So we have a fine of $10,000, but we also need to require replacement of the tree, and not just replacement with a 15 or 24-inch box tree, but some additional replacement requirements as well. However, to be consistent with how we've handled similar cases, our inspector reviewed this with us, and it was clear that this tree had been, for all intents and purposes, removed. So that's why the fine for $10,000 for the illegal removal is issued. It's also why we issued a fine letter for excessive pruning 2021. We talked about a fine. We certainly hadn't anticipated a removal like this. That's a little bit about the backstory on this matter. We've had trees removed with permits in this immediate area. It's a U-shaped section off of Ocean Avenue. So I feel like we're out there, we're posting notices, orange notices on trees and poles over the last 10 years when trees have been removed. So I do believe there's been adequate education and outreach that where a property owner would know you need a permit to remove a tree. And additionally, excessive pruning also earns people a fine. So to be consistent with how we've handled similar cases, the fine was issued for $10,000 due to the illegal removal and or destruction of the tree. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. Is the property owner present to have any or present any comments?
Hello. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. Hi, thanks for taking the time. So yeah, the notice in 2021. So unfortunately that was sent to the property owners, which is listed as my uncle and my aunt. And I'm not going to go too much into my family details, but communication is extremely terrible. I do truly wish that that letter was communicated to me at least. In 2021, we were going through a little bit of a tough time. My father was diagnosed with cancer and going through really bad chemotherapy and just end of life care. So I think it was just really hectic. The communication wasn't there and I wasn't notified of this letter. And just to, I guess my statement is gonna comprise of three parts: what happened with why and intent, what I have learned, and what I am requesting and appealing. So I can tell you the exact date that I did this, and looking at the picture, it is quite jarring. I did completely destroy the tree, and this happened on February 12, 2023, which is Super Bowl Sunday. And I had the day off, and I decided to go ahead and quote unquote prune the tree. As everyone knows, this has been the worst year for rain, wind, storm, especially in the beginning of the year. There was tons of floods, trees falling, debris falling everywhere. This was especially problematic with debris going under our front gate into the mudroom. And just out of coincidence, my uncle, he had a ruptured brain aneurysm. So he has really bad mobility issues. He was walking out to the front gate and actually nearly tripped and fell on the debris. And which is why I decided to take the quote unquote proactive approach in pruning the tree. Now, looking back at your slide, this was a very informative session. I do understand that negligence is not an excuse. So segueing into my next part is what I have learned. And funny enough, a good friend of mine is an arborist for San Francisco. And I did send him a picture of the tree. And his response was, "Why did you do that?" And his one-word response was, "Photosynthesis, dude," or 2 words. And looking at the picture, I realized what an extreme mistake that I've made. And just a brief background on myself, I lived in San Francisco my whole life, and I do plan on living here for the rest of my life. Does that give me the right to do what I do? Absolutely not. It's actually quite the opposite. I should have known better. My wife and I plan to live here for the rest of our lives. I plan to be an SF resident forever. I grew up with great memories, running the mile test at Chrissy Fields, playing soccer games at Polo Fields and Golden Gate Park.
30 seconds.
And I was a true beneficiary to all the great work that you guys do. Looking forward to the 50,000 trees being planned, to be planted throughout the next 20 years. I did educate myself on the proper procedures, who to reach out to, Article 16. And what I am requesting is, please allow me to pay the dues and whatever the cost it will cost to replace the tree, but without the fine. That $10,000 fine will cause just immense financial hardship on my family. If we can work on reducing the fine or eliminating the fine, more than happy to take the informational class. I would love to take that class just to educate myself on the proper processes. If you guys can sign me up for volunteer events with Urban Foresties. I ruined one tree. Give me the opportunity to plant 10 trees, 20 trees, 30 trees around the city. I would love to do that. So if you guys can work with me on that, I would truly appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments. Chris, do you have any rebuttal?
Thank you. I always hate that we call it rebuttal. Chris with Public Works, Bureau of Urban Forestry, but yeah, no additional feedback to add. Just was listening closely, and the Public Works does have monthly Love Our City events, and they schedule them. We schedule them in the 11 supervisorial districts each month. December being the one exception when we don't host them. And so, yeah, we should take a look at when the District 7 Love Our City event is, because we often do plant 10 to 20 replacement trees during that type of event. So literally we as a separate note, and not separate, but related to this matter, we can forward those volunteer opportunities. But nope, just appreciate the honesty in the feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Does the property owner have any additional commentary?
Oh, sorry, I missed additional comments. Thanks for the time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I see we have one other hand up. Is this relating to this matter, or is it a general comment?
Relates to this matter.
Okay, then please proceed.
Yeah, so my name is Paul Lanzi. I'm the resident at 162 Dorado Terrace, and so worked with Chris to get some of these trees planted in the neighborhood. I think Chris already did a great job summarizing the situation, the neighborhood situation, etc. And I'm very glad to hear Andrew confirm that he was the one that destroyed the tree and is open to replacing it with a new tree. I don't take a position on whether the fine should be reduced or eliminated, but I'm very happy to hear that the tree will be replaced. That's the end of my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any additional public comments?
I don't see any other hands at this time.
Okay, then we will consider the matter of 208-314 complete. Do we have any public comments that are not specifically addressing one of the three orders on the agenda today?
No hands showing.
Okay. In that case, if there are no more public comments, then we will consider this hearing complete. As noted before, I will be submitting my recommendations to the director within 10 business days or 2 weeks. And then they will make their final determinations on this. Thank you everyone for attending and presenting. This hearing is now complete.
Thank you.